In 2021, the French government basically woke up to a $40 billion nightmare,
Yeah, it was quite the shock to the system.
right? With virtually no warning at all, Australia just tore up what was supposed to be the defense contract of the century. I mean, they completely abandoned this massive deal with France to build a fleet of conventional submarines.
And instead, they pivoted sharply. They announced this highly classified, totally unprecedented partnership with the United States and the United Kingdom.
So today, we are finding out why. If you are tracking the Indo-Pacific, or if you are preparing a high-level briefing on global security architectures, this is your foundational deep dive.
Absolutely. We are looking at the source notes covering the AUKUS alliance, so Australia, the UK, and the US. We are going to unpack the exact mechanics of this agreement.
Right, mapping the cause and effect chains that move from shifting geopolitical tectonics straight through to, well, structural policy implications. No filler today, just immediate, rigorous analysis.
Because when you first hear the acronym AUKUS, the media shorthand almost always reduces it to just, the nuclear submarine deal.
Which is, frankly, a massive oversimplification.
It is a vast oversimplification. I mean, if you only extract one foundational concept from the source material regarding the background of AUKUS, it is that this pact extends way, way beyond traditional military hardware procurement.
Okay, so what is the actual focus then?
The explicit focus is on the deep integration of defense and security-related science, supply chains, industrial bases, and technology.
Right, so it is less of a standard military treaty and more of an exclusive high-tech incubator.
Exactly.
The notes specifically highlight the integration of emerging technologies, and we need to be precise here. We are talking about artificial intelligence, quantum technologies, and advanced undersea capabilities.
It is a complete fusion of these three nations' defense industrial bases, a deliberate structural pooling of resources to address technology dependence and really secure strategic autonomy.
But wait, let me pause you there because we need to explain how this actually functions. We throw words like quantum and AI around a lot.
Here.
Why are those specific technologies the pillars of a naval and maritime alliance?
Well, think about the future of undersea warfare. It is no longer just about the physical submarine. It is about data.
Data collection underwater.
Right. If you have quantum sensors, you can detect microscopic anomalies in the Earth's magnetic or gravitational fields.
Anomalies caused by what?
Caused by a massive, stealthy submarine passing by deep underwater. I mean, traditional sonar might miss it, but quantum sensors will not.
Oh, wow.
And then you need artificial intelligence to process that ocean of acoustic and sensor data coming in. You need AI to instantly differentiate between, say, a whale, a seismic event, and an adversary's nuclear sub.
Okay, that makes total sense. So Aukus is essentially a bet that whoever controls the integration of quantum sensors, AI processing, and undersea hardware well, they control the oceans.
Precisely. And to understand why this extreme level of technological integration was deemed suddenly necessary, we really have to examine the trigger event.
Right, because every major geopolitical realignment has a catalyst. And I kind of hinted at it in the intro.
The scrapped French contract.
Yeah. Let us dive into the details of that because the scale of the reversal is just staggering.
Huh.
I mean, back in 2016, Australia had officially selected the French shipbuilder naval group.
Right, to build a brand new submarine fleet.
Exactly. The goal was to replace Australia's two-decade-old Collins-class submarines.
And, the Collins class are conventional diesel-electric submarines. They have served Australia well, but they were definitely aging.
So the 2016 French contract was an agreement to build state-of-the-art, but still conventional diesel-electric submarines. And the price tag was roughly $40 billion.
$40 billion, yeah.
You don't just tear up a contract of that magnitude with a major global player, a key European ally like France, unless your entire threat perception has fundamentally shifted.
No, you definitely don't.
The diplomatic fallout of burning the French was enormous. France was absolutely furious. So what forced this dramatic, sudden shift in strategy between the signing in 2016 and the cancellation in 2021?
Well, the root cause is a tectonic shift in the geopolitical landscape of the Indo-Pacific.
Yeah.
Specifically, the notes point to China's rapidly growing power and mounting bellicosity in the region.
Yeah, it is vital to note that when the AUKUS nations announced the pact, They carefully avoided explicitly naming China in the official text.
Yeah, diplomatic protocol. You never say the quiet part out loud in the official press release.
Right. Officially, they framed the alliance around upholding the international rules-based order and promoting peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific.
But the source material is unequivocal here. The counter-China policy is the undeniable root cause.
Okay, let us unpack the bellicosity part. What exactly was China doing that made Australia look at a $40 billion fleet of conventional submarines and say, these are useless to us now?
So, the U.S., Australia, and regional allies had grown deeply concerned about China's increasing assertiveness, particularly its rapid militarization of the South China Sea.
Island building and things like that.
Exactly. China had been engaging in extensive island-building campaigns, constructing military runways and radar installations on disputed reefs.
Which changes the entire maritime dynamic.
It does. Furthermore, their antipathy toward Japan, Taiwan, and Australia had become much more overt. I mean, they were applying economic pressure on Australia and escalating gray zone maritime tactics across the whole region.
So the strategic calculus fundamentally changed. Australia realized that in a contested environment, one dominated by an expanding Chinese blue water Navy conventional submarines, simply would not survive.
Or at least they couldn't project the necessary deterrent force.
Right. The hardware had to change and the alliances had to harden.
Exactly. Which brings us to the stakeholders. Because to truly analyze AUKUS, we need to methodically break down the specific drivers for each of the three nations involved.
It's not just a monolith, right?
Yeah, not at all. Each nation brings a distinct strategic motivation to the table. Let's start with the United States.
This connects directly to a major policy shift spanning multiple U.S. administrations, doesn't it? The pivoting Asia policy.
Yeah, the pivot to Asia is a recognition that the center of global geopolitical and economic gravity has shifted.
Away from the Middle East.
Right. For decades, U.S. foreign policy and military resources were heavily concentrated in West Asia, managing protracted conflicts there. The pivot emphasizes the strategic necessity of shifting attention, diplomatic weight, and military resources toward the Indo-Pacific region.
And the notes provide a very specific, tangible data point that proves this is not just political rhetoric. It is backed by hard legislation.
It is. We are talking about the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act,
Commonly referred to as ARIA.
ARA is a vital piece of administrative framework to understand. It was announced and passed in 2018.
I want to focus on the numbers attached to ARIA. The act authorized $1.5 billion in spending for U.S. programs in East Asia and Southeast Asia.
And while $1.5 billion might seem relatively small compared to a $40 billion submarine deal, its significance is structural.
How so?
Well, the stated objective of ARA is to develop a comprehensive, multifaceted, and principled long-term strategic vision for the Indo-Pacific.
So it's basically laying the groundwork.
Right. It provides the legislative and financial scaffolding for U.S. engagement in the region. That encompasses security assistance, economic partnerships, and the promotion of democratic values. ARA signals that the U.S. pivot is officially institutionalized.
Okay, so ARA 2018 is the bureaucratic engine behind the U.S. motivation. Make sure you underline ARA 2018 in your notes. Now, what about the United Kingdom?
That's an interesting one.
Right, because geographically, they are a long way from the South China Sea.
Yeah.
What is their strategic play here?
The UK's motivation stems from a completely different domestic catalyst, and that is Brexit.
Leaving the European Union.
Yes. Brexit fundamentally altered Britain's geopolitical standing. Outside of the EU bloc, the UK needed to aggressively search for ways to reassert its global position and project influence.
This birthed the strategic concept of global Britain, right?
Exactly. As part of this recalibration, the UK executed a deliberate strategic pivot toward the Indo-Pacific. They recognized it as the most economically dynamic and strategically vital region of the 21st century.
So ICALIS is basically the UK's high-level entry ticket into the Indo-Pacific theater.
It really is. It allows them to tightly integrate their advanced defense and technological sectors with the U.S. and Australia.
Proving they are still a top-tier global security player post-Brexit.
Precisely. Which brings us to the frontline stakeholder, the nation geographically closest to the tension.
Australia.
Right. As we established, Australia is under increasing pressure from an assertive China. Their overriding objective in joining OK is to balance this threat.
And to achieve this, the core deliverable of the pact is for Australia to acquire at least 8 nuclear-powered submarines.
Leveraging heavily guarded U.S. and U.K. expertise, yes.
Now, the notes mention the concept of balancing, which is a cornerstone of international relations theory.
Mm-hmm.
How exactly are we defining balancing in this specific context?
Well, in international relations theory, balancing encompasses the actions a state takes to equalize the odds against a more powerful state.
Leveling the playing field.
Exactly. The fundamental goal is to make it more difficult, and therefore less likely, for a powerful state to exert a military or coercive advantage over weaker ones. You build up your own capabilities or you form alliances to raise the cost of aggression.
But the notes make a very careful distinction here. They do not just call it balancing. They use the term limited hard balancing.
Yes, that distinction is crucial.
I want to push on this to make sure we understand the mechanics.
Yeah.
If we think of traditional hard balancing, we're usually talking about a formal, rigid military alliance.
Like NATO.
Right, NATO is the classic example. Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all. It is an ironclad mutual defense treaty. So how is limited hard balancing different? Is it like an open source tech ecosystem versus a rigid corporate merger?
That is a highly effective analogy. If NATO is a legally binding corporate merger where all liabilities are shared, limited hard balancing is indeed more like an open source ecosystem, or perhaps a highly advanced coordinated neighborhood watch.
Meaning they share the absolute best technology, they coordinate their patrols, they integrate their supply chains, but they stop just short of a treaty that legally forces them to go to war if one gets attacked.
Exactly. Limited hard balancing relies on informal alliances or strategic partnerships. They are characterized by extremely high levels of military coordination, interoperability, and capability sharing.
But no legal tripwires.
Right. It intentionally avoids the formal, binding, collective defense obligations of a treaty like NATO. Australia has been actively utilizing this strategy, deepening partnerships with the US, the UK, and also India to achieve this limited hard balancing against China.
So they are rapidly building capacity to equalize the odds without necessarily triggering the diplomatic tripwires of a formal treaty alliance.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have the motivations map. The U.S. is pivoting via ARIA 2018. The UK is asserting its post-Brexit relevance. Australia is engaging in limited hard balancing to protect its maritime borders.
Right.
But the second Australia says, hey, we are acquiring 8 nuclear-powered submarines. A massive flashing red light goes off regarding international law.
It absolutely does. It introduces an immediate and severe nuclear non-proliferation dilemma.
Because Australia is a signatory to and has formally ratified the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons Treaty, universally known as the NPT.
Yes, they are.
Wait, I need to challenge this because on the surface, it sounds like blatant hypocrisy. You signed a treaty saying you will not proliferate nuclear technology, and then you tear up a conventional sub-deal to buy the most advanced nuclear submarine technology on the planet.
It looks contradictory, yes.
How does Australia, or the US and UK for that matter, legally justify this? How is it not a direct violation of the NPT?
It is a critical question, and the answer lies in a highly technical yet incredibly consequential legal distinction within the NPT itself.
What's the distinction?
The distinction is between nuclear weapons and nuclear propulsion.
Warheads versus engines.
Precisely. Australia has vehemently vowed to strictly abide by all tenets of the NPT. They are explicitly not acquiring nuclear weapons, warheads, or the capability to enrich uranium for explosive devices.
Okay, so what exactly are they getting?
They are acquiring sealed nuclear reactors solely to provide propulsion and power for the submarines. The NPT contains a loophole or an allowance for non-nuclear weapon states to utilize nuclear material for non-exclusive military purposes.
Like naval propulsion.
Exactly.
But even with that loophole, the technology transfer is astronomically sensitive. I mean, the U.S. has only ever shared this specific nuclear propulsion technology with one other nation in history, right?
Yes, the UK, back in the 1950s.
So sharing it with Australia is a massive geopolitical statement.
And that statement is highly intentional. The strategic logic detailed in the notes is that transferring this crown jewel nuclear propulsion technology to an ally is intended to send a profound message of reassurance to countries across Asia.
A message that the U.S. isn't going anywhere.
Right. It is designed to signal unwavering, permanent U.S. commitment to the security and stability of the Indo-Pacific region.
But reassurance is a tricky business, isn't it? By introducing nuclear reactors into their naval fleet, Australia risks terrifying its immediate neighbors.
They do. They really have to walk a diplomatic tightrope here.
Specifically regarding ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. ASEAN is the diplomatic core of the region, and they are incredibly sensitive to superpower competition in their backyard.
Which is exactly why Australia has gone out of its way to unambiguously reaffirm its commitment to ASEAN centrality.
They're actively trying to alleviate regional anxieties.
Yes. To do this, the notes highlight that Australia continues to actively and vocally support two specific regional treaties.
These are crucial legal references for any comprehensive analysis. The first is the South Pacific Nuclear-Free Zone Treaty,
Right.
and the second is the Treaty of Southeast Asia Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone. Make sure you note both of those down.
These treaties are foundational to the regional security architecture. By reaffirming them, Australia is essentially saying to its neighbors, yes, we are acquiring nuclear reactors for propulsion, but we fundamentally respect and adhere to the nuclear weapon-free zones of the South Pacific and Southeast Asia.
It is a delicate act of strategic communication. You are deterring an adversary while simultaneously attempting not to trigger an arms race panic among your friends.
A very fine line to walk.
So we have traced the geopolitics and the legal frameworks. Now we need to look at the practical implications, because actions have consequences, and the causal chain here moves rapidly from geopolitics directly into geoeconomics.
The economic chain reaction of Aukus is profound. I mean, we already discussed the immediate termination of the $40 billion naval group contract.
Right, which is a severe economic blow to France.
It impacted their defense industry and their broader strategic economic planning significantly.
But simultaneously, AUKUS initiates an unprecedented economic integration between the US, the UK, and Australia.
Yes, we are talking about the deep fusing of supply chains, industrial bases, and emerging tech sectors.
It is shifting billions of dollars of future economic activity, research grants, and manufacturing into this new trilateral grouping.
And that massive economic integration is not happening in a vacuum. It is purpose-built to serve the security chain.
Specifically, the goal is undersea dominance.
Exactly. And to grasp the security implications fully, we must clearly articulate why the shift from diesel-electric to nuclear propulsion is so revolutionary for Australia's capabilities.
Let us break down the mechanical differences, because it really explains the geopolitics. How exactly does a conventional diesel-electric sub work compared to a nuclear one?
Well, a conventional submarine uses diesel engines to charge massive battery banks. When it is submerged, it runs quietly on battery power.
Which sounds good, but there's a catch.
Right. Those batteries drain. And to recharge them, the submarine must rise close to the surface and deploy a snorkel to take in oxygen to run the diesel engine.
And the moment it snorkels, it is vulnerable.
Highly vulnerable. In an era of advanced satellite imaging, drone surveillance, and pervasive radar, sticking a pipe above the waves in the contested South China Sea is essentially announcing your position to everyone.
Wow, okay. So a nuclear-powered submarine, on the other hand, operates a closed-loop, pressurized water reactor.
Yes, it does not need oxygen for propulsion. It literally never needs to snorkel.
Therefore, the tactical contrast is just stark. Nuclear submarines can be deployed for significantly longer periods.
Their deployment is limited primarily by the crew's food supplies and endurance, not fuel. They need to surface far less frequently, which massively enhances their stealth capabilities.
Furthermore, they possess a much longer range and can travel at higher sustained speeds underwater.
And if you are Australia, dealing with the vast tyranny of distance between your naval bases and the critical choke points of the Indo-Pacific, speed and range are everything.
Right, so by building a fleet of at least 8 of these advanced platforms, Australia will exponentially increase its maritime security capacity.
Which in turn provides the entire AUKUS alliance with a markedly stronger, highly lethal, and sustained military presence in the region.
But as Newton's third law suggests, every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Always.
As soon as you introduce that kind of apex predator capability into the region, you reshape the entire geopolitical chain. Let us look at the immediate fallout, starting with France.
France's reaction was furious. They heavily criticized the move. They felt strategically sidelined and deeply insulted.
I mean, losing a $40 billion deal is painful no matter what.
But for France, which considers itself an Indo-Pacific power due to its overseas territories like New Caledonia, being cut out of a major Western security initiative in the region stung deeply.
Then, crucially, you have China's reaction, the actual target, the balancing strategy.
China's official response was swift and severe. They issued stark cautions stating that this new pact would severely undermine regional peace and stability.
They warned it would intensify an arms race in the Indo-Pacific.
Furthermore, they directly attacked the legal justifications we discussed earlier. China argued that AUKUS undermines international non-proliferation efforts, flatly rejecting the U.S. and Australian narrative that the NPT is being respected.
And what about the immediate neighborhood? We talked about Australia trying to reassure ASEAN, but how did ASEAN actually respond?
The notes point out a very telling detail here. There has been no official statement from ASEAN as a unified forum regarding
That
Aukus.
silence is loud.
It really is. It reflects how internally divided ASEAN is when it comes to navigating the U.S.-China rivalry. Consensus is their operating model, and they simply could not reach one here.
However, while the bloc remained officially silent, individual member states did not. Out of the 10 member states, 2 explicitly showed signs of protest.
Malaysia and Indonesia.
This is critical. Why those 2 specifically? If you look at a map, Malaysia and Indonesia straddle the most vital maritime choke points in the world.
The Strait of Malacca, the Sunda Strait, the Lombok Strait.
Right. They're geographically caught right in the middle.
Their concerns hinge precisely on what China warned about: the terrifying prospect of a nuclear arms race in their immediate maritime backyard.
They are incredibly wary of superpower competition, escalating into a massive hardware buildup near their borders,
Fearing that a localized conflict could quickly spiral out of control.
which perfectly transitions us to the broader regional impact, specifically looking at India, the wider response, and the overarching balancing strategy.
There's a fascinating diplomatic detail in the source notes regarding how AUKUS was rolled out.
Yes, before the public announcement, before the press conferences, the Australian Prime Minister specifically picked up the phone and called the leaders of Japan and India to explain the new alliance.
That preemptive communication strategy is vital. You do not want your closest strategic partners learning about a paradigm-shifting military pact on the evening news.
And why Japan and India? Because Japan, India, Australia, and the U.S. already form a critical strategic dialogue known as the Quad.
Right. The Quad seeks increased cooperation among its member nations to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific.
And both India and Japan share what the notes accurately describe as an uneasy relationship with their increasingly assertive neighbor, China.
Uneasy is putting it mildly. India has ongoing, sometimes lethal, border disputes in the Himalayas. Japan has persistent maritime friction in the East China Sea.
So Australia needed to ensure that AUKUS was perceived by New Delhi and Tokyo as a strategic asset, not a unilateral complication.
Which requires us to really map out the institutional relationship between AUKUS and the Quad, because this is a prime area for analytical confusion on an exam or in a briefing.
It is essential to draw a clear distinction. Let us break that down. How do they differ?
The Quad and AUKUS are distinct yet complementary. They operate on different axes and utilize completely different tools.
Okay, starting with the Quad.
The Quad is a broader diplomatic, economic, and security dialogue. Its initiatives straddle both the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean.
It has a broad geographic mandate.
Right, and it focuses on issues ranging from vaccine distribution and climate change to maritime domain awareness and supply chain resilience.
So it is a softer, broader front. AUKUS, on the other hand, is fundamentally different.
The notes emphasize that AUKUS is Pacific-centric.
Pacific-centric. This is a crucial geographic distinction. Make sure you catch that. While the Quad spans 2 oceans, AUKUS is hyper-focused on the maritime environment of the Pacific.
Particularly the contested waters of the Western Pacific and the South China Sea.
Shifting AUKUS' fulcrum so heavily to the Pacific Ocean serves multiple strategic purposes, doesn't it?
It does. Geopolitically, it demonstrates a hardened, highly capable balance against China's naval expansion. But more importantly, this strategy potentially strengthens the security of both Japan and Taiwan.
Because in the face of China's mounting bellicosity, AUKUS places a massive technological and military deterrent right in their immediate theater of concern.
Exactly. It forces Chinese military planners to calculate against not just a broad diplomatic coalition like the Quad, but a highly integrated, technologically superior military-industrial alliance.
An alliance operating highly stealthy nuclear submarines in their operational backyard.
So they complement each other perfectly.
The Quad provides the broad diplomatic and economic architecture across the entire Indo-Pacific, while AUKUS acts as the sharpened, hyper-focused military tech spearhead in the Pacific.
Which brings us to the future implications.
Right. If we synthesize the long-term trajectory based on all the factors we've discussed, the geopolitics, the economics, the security mechanics, it is abundantly clear that AUKUS will fundamentally reshape international relations in the Indo-Pacific and beyond for decades.
It is not just a one-off submarine purchase. It is a permanent integration of defense ecosystems.
We are left looking at a deep, defining tension between 2 competing visions of the region's future.
On one side, you have the stated AUKUS objective, promoting stability, supporting shared democratic values, and ensuring a peaceful, rules-based international order by deterring unilateral aggression through strength.
And on the other side,
You have China's stark warning and the anxieties of nations like Indonesia and Malaysia. The reality of an intensified arms race, the hardening of adversarial blocs, and the potential erosion of vital non-proliferation norms.
that tension between deterrence and escalation is basically the defining geopolitical story of our era.
It is. It accelerates the multipolarity of the region. It forces every nation in the Indo-Pacific to urgently reevaluate their own strategic autonomy.
They have to look at their supply chain security and their technology dependence in a completely new light.
Recognizing that in the modern era, controlling AI and quantum computing is just as critical to national survival as the physical armor on a naval vessel.
Having comprehensively mapped the landscape, from the triggering cancellation of the French contract to the legal nuances of the MPT and the institutional interplay with the Quad, we need to structure this analysis.
Definitely. If you are walking into a briefing room tomorrow to deliver an executive summary, or if you need to construct a high-scoring analytical assessment, you need a precise architectural framework.
Let's build those frameworks. If someone asks you for the core thesis, a tight 150-word equivalent elevator pitch on the strategic significance of Aukus for Indo-Pacific security, what is the absolute best way to structure that?
Okay, a high-level executive summary should follow this tight architecture. First, you establish the definition immediately.
Right. Define Aukus as a trilateral defense and technology pact between Australia, the UK, and the US.
Exactly. Fundamentally focused on integrating emerging technologies like AI, quantum, and advanced undersea capabilities.
Okay, getting the baseline definition down first. What's step 2?
Second, identify the trigger and context. State that it was catalyzed by China's growing assertiveness, particularly in the South China Sea.
Got it. And the third point.
Third, highlight the core deliverable. You have to point to the provision of 8 nuclear-powered submarines to Australia, replacing the aging Collins class, and mention that this move necessitated the highly controversial scrapping of a $40 billion French contract.
Okay, so definition, trigger, deliverable. What's next?
Fourth, define the strategic mechanism. You deploy the precise terminology here, limited hard balancing. Explain that it is an informal alliance characterized by extremely high military coordination.
Limited hard balancing. We will definitely need to repeat that one.
Yeah. Finally, conclude with its institutional fit. Note clearly that Aukus is Pacific-centric and deliberately complementary to the broader mandate of the Quad, ultimately aiming to maintain a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific theater.
That is a flawless, information-dense summary. It hits every strategic pillar. Now, what if you need to provide a deeper, more comprehensive analysis? Say, a 250-word equivalent deep dive memo analyzing the geopolitical and institutional implications of the alliance.
For a more expansive analysis, rely on a robust intra-body conclusion structure to guide your logic.
Okay, walk us through the intro.
In your introduction, define Aukus and immediately contextualize it within the broader macro trends. Cite the U.S. pivoting Asia strategy and specifically anchor it with the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act, ARIA, of 2018.
Noting its $1.5 billion authorization.
Right. Alongside this, mention the UK's post-Brexit strategic repositioning as global Britain.
Perfect. So what goes into the body paragraphs?
For the first body section, focus on security and technology. Clearly contrast the operational capabilities of nuclear versus diesel-electric submarines. Emphasize longer deployment cycles and vastly enhanced stealth. Then, broaden the lens beyond hardware to focus on the unprecedented deep integration of defense supply chains, artificial intelligence, and quantum technology among the 3 allied nations.
And the second body paragraph?
In the second body section, pivot to geopolitics and alliances. Explain the nuances of limited hard balancing. Discuss the vital geographic distinction. Aukus's Pacific-centric nature versus the Quad's broader Indian-Pacific spread.
This is where we bring in the stakeholder reaction.
Crucially, yes, you must address China's explicit warning of an impending arms race, France's severe diplomatic anger over the scrapped naval group deal, and the specific non-proliferation concerns raised by regional players like Malaysia and Indonesia.
And finally, the conclusion.
In your conclusion, synthesize the diplomatic tightrope. Emphasize how Australia is attempting to balance its strict NPT obligations and its respect for ASEAN centrality.
That's where we specifically reference the South Pacific and Southeast Asia nuclear weapon-free zone treaties.
Exactly. You balance that against the overriding existential necessity of countering China's bellicosity and protecting regional allies like Taiwan and Japan.
That structure guarantees you will not miss a single critical dynamic. Let us do a rapid conversational recap to ensure all the terminology is locked in. We need to make sure the causal chain is completely clear.
Let us trace it sequentially. It begins with geopolitics. The macro driver is the U.S. pivot to Asia, authorized by frameworks like ARA 2018, reacting directly to the mounting threat of an assertive China.
Which immediately triggers the economy. The geopolitical shift results in tearing up the $40 billion French naval group deal, while simultaneously initiating the deep fusion of U.S., UK, and Australian defense supply chains and tech sectors.
Right, and that economic integration builds the security architecture. The core agreement is the delivery of 8 nuclear-powered submarines for Australia, fundamentally shifting the region's military balance through limited hard balancing.
Which finally dictates the domestic and regional impact. The UK secures a vital post-Brexit role in the Indo-Pacific, while Australia works overtime to reassure the Quad, Japan, India, and ASEAN that this Pacific-centric, highly lethal move is complementary to broader regional security, despite the anxieties of nations like Indonesia and Malaysia.
That's the complete chain. Let us quickly review the essential terminology we covered.
The terms you must have at your fingertips. AROI 2018, the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act, which authorized that critical $1.5 billion.
The concept of limited hard balancing. Informal strategic partnerships with high military coordination, distinct from the formal treaty obligations of a NATO-style alliance.
The regional treaties. The South Pacific Nuclear-Free Zone Treaty and the Treaty of Southeast Asia Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone. Crucial for demonstrating adherence to ASEAN centrality.
And, of course, the NPT, the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons Treaty, highlighting the vital legal distinction between nuclear propulsion and nuclear weapons.
All right, I'm going to fire off a few rapid questions just to test how well we have synthesized all of this. I'm going to ask you listening, so see if you can answer before the expert does. First, what was the specific catalyst that sparked the immediate diplomatic fallout in Europe prior to the ASEAN announcement?
The cancellation of the 2016 contract with the French shipbuilder Naval Group, a $40 billion agreement to replace Australia's Collins-class diesel-electric submarines.
Exactly. Next, if someone asks you to explain the difference in geographic focus between the Quad and Aukus, how do you summarize it?
Well, the Quad straddles both the Indian and Pacific Oceans with a broad diplomatic and security mandate, whereas Aukus is a highly focused technology and military pact that is fundamentally Pacific-centric.
Spot on. Last one. Which two ASEAN nations explicitly broke the bloc's silence to protest Aukus, and what was their primary stated fear?
Malaysia and Indonesia, and their primary fear was that introducing nuclear-powered submarines into the region would trigger a localized nuclear arms race.
Perfect. If you can track those dynamics, you have a master-level understanding of this topic. Give us the final synthesized thought to close out this strategic briefing.
If we distill this entire complex matrix down to its core, Aukus is a paradigm-shifting exercise in limited hard balancing. By integrating advanced defense supply chains, pioneering quantum and AI research, and controversially transferring highly guarded nuclear submarine technology, the US, the UK, and Australia are fundamentally restructuring the Indo-Pacific's maritime security architecture.
Is massive.
It operates as a highly lethal Pacific-centric complement to the broader Quad dialogue. It is designed to aggressively enforce a rules-based order against China's rising assertiveness, all while navigating a precarious, razor-thin diplomatic line between necessary military deterrence and deeply rooted regional non-proliferation anxieties.
It is a massive recalibration of global power, and you now have the complete architectural breakdown. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Go for it.
We spent a lot of time talking about limited hard balancing and the shift from conventional to nuclear submarines. But look closer at the true nature of this integration. If extreme technological integration fusing AI, quantum data, and industrial supply chains becomes the new gold standard for countering rival superpowers, how long until controlling those economic supply chains and quantum AI labs becomes more vital to a nation's sheer survival than maintaining traditional physical standing armies? Keep diving deep.